Hey, what's going on, Ninth Age? This is Obsidian Anubis, and I'm back with another Ninth Age battle report. And as I promised, this is Orcs and Goblins versus Saurian Ancients, and this is a 5,000 point battle. Big battle. This is with the new 2.0 rules, so I won't be going into too many details about how things went. I would, just give you kind of outcome of how things go. Before we get to the battle, I'm going to do a quick brush and fluff. This is my new Orc BSB. He is a Feral slash Iron Orc BSB. I think he turned out really well. He's the new AOS War Chanter, who I've trimmed down his weapons to give a banner and a giant sword. So I think he turned out really nicely. And yeah, we'll get to the battle now. Alright, so my opponent has a block of Saurus Warriors. I think that's 30 with Spears and full command. And they have the Serpent banner, or Serpent Totem, the one that lets them fight an extra rank. In front of them is the Thyroscutus with the Solar Engine. Next to them is a block of 10 Skink Hunters with blowpipes, and behind them is my opponent's general, Saros Oldblood on Ancient Carnosaur, or Alpha Carnosaur, excuse me. And then that little group of spears in between the two, that is the objective. So this was capture the objectives, or the one where you have two objectives. So that was one of the objectives. And then the back picture is a block of, I think, 25 Temple Guard with full command, and with them is the Cutter Lord, Cutter Lord, who is also the BSB, and he is running Lore of Evocation, I believe, for this battle. And then over here on my opponent's right flank, my opponent had a block of 25 Saurus Warriors with spears in full command, also the same Serpent, so fight an extra rank. In front of them is another Thyroscutus with the same Sun Altar engine, and then 3 Ramphadon Riders. So for me, I brought 5 Feral Boar Boys on the far left, 2 Chariots next to a block of 50 Cave Goblins with 3 Madgets, full command, and nets, and with them is a Cave Goblin Witch Doctor of Pyromancy. He's an apprentice, so he knows 2 spells. Next to them is my general, an Iron Orc Warlord on a chariot with the Axe of the Apocalypse. And then in the center and the right flank, I have 24 Iron Orcs, I believe, with full command. And with them is my BSB. He's an Iron Orc Chief. Behind them, I have 5 Natural Dashers who are not skirmishing, so I realized that later on and grouped them up. I also have another block of 50 Cave Goblins with 3 Madgets, full command, and nets. Next to them is a Giant, and then I have DD, my Gargantula, which is by the forest, and 5 more Feral Orc Boar Boys. And my opponent placed their token there, and you can see they also placed the chameleons behind my lines. So if we look at the battlefield as a whole, you can see it was the diagonal deployment. I've circled the 2 objectives, so one is on the hill behind me, and the other one is between the Thyroscutus and the Alpha Carnosaur. So my opponent, I think, dropped the army first, or dropped most of the army first, so went first. So Saurian Ancient turn 1. So it's kind of a crisscross with the Skinks and the Thyroscutus moving up. And the right side, my opponent just kind of moved up rather aggressively, but not overly aggressively, I'd say. In shooting, my opponent moved the chameleons and killed 3 of my Nash Dashers. Luckily, they did well. I mean, the panic, so they didn't make a panic test or loss of wounds test or whatever it's called these days. But they're fine. So that brings us to the end of Saurian Ancient turn 1. So that brings us to Orcs and Goblins turn 1. You can see I charged one of my chariots into the Thyroscutus there on the left. I do not believe I took any wounds from going through dangerous terrain, so that was lucky. Other than that, I just kind of moved up my forces, as you can see here. Yeah, so there's that charge I made. In shooting, I shot out my 3 Madgets as they were within 8 inches of the Raptidon Riders. I threw two towards the Raptidon Riders. 1 went through and managed to do 2 wounds. The third one I threw out towards the Saurus Warriors to dissuade them from charging into my Iron Orcs next turn. In combat with the chariot, I managed to put 1 wound on with impact hits, and my opponent in return managed to put 1 wound on my chariot. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient turn 2. So my opponent charged in with the Thyroscutus and the Saurus Warriors, doing a little crisscross. The Saurus Warriors did go through the Madget, so they lost 3 of their number because of that. And you can also see my opponent moved up the chameleons to continue shooting at my Nash Dashers. over here on the left flank, my opponent kind of moved up the Saurus Warriors and the Temple Guard, and then moved the Skinks around. In close combat, I managed to another wound on my opponent, and my opponent managed to do nothing to me, but we all stuck. In close combat over here, I think I chose great weapons, which might have been a mistake, but I was hoping I could kill the Thyriscutus, as it only has 4 wounds. But unfortunately, I rolled relatively poor. I ended up losing a rank of Iron Orcs and only managed to do a wound to the Thyriscutus. I did manage to kill about 6 or so of the Saurus Warriors, and they actually broke from combat, which was just an unlucky roll on my opponent. As it was said and done, I think my opponent lost by like 1 or 2, so they really probably shouldn't have broken, but they did end up breaking. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient turn, Orcs and Goblins turn 2. So I charged my Giant into the flank of the Thyriscutus. I kind of moved my Boar Boys and DD around the rock. Unfortunately, I kind of didn't leave myself enough room there, so they're both kind of congested trying to get through that, between that impassable and the board edge. I charged my General into my opponent's Thyriscutus on the bottom left of this picture. You can also see I have a wound on my character. My opponent has been throwing a lot of the evocation spells towards my General and did manage to put 1 wound off. I also attempted a longbow charge with my Feral Orcs into the flank of the Saurus Warriors with spears, the purple ones, but they failed that charge, unfortunately. I also moved my second block of Cave Goblins up within 8 inches of the Thyriscutus and threw all 3 of the Madgets out. You can see 1 in this picture. I think I threw 1 towards the General, and I think I threw the other 2 straight towards the Temple Guard. I think 1 went through the Temple Guard, and 1 stopped short. I just haven't placed it down. So here's what I think what it is. So you can see 1 behind the General, 1 next to the General, and 1 kind of in the middle. My General managed to make short work of the Thyriscutus and killed him and then decided to overrun, which might not have been the best decision. I probably should have held, but either way I overran into the Saurus block. So on my opponent's turn, he declared a charge with the Temple Guard and the Alpha Connoisseur into my Cave Goblins. They did go through some Madgets and ended up losing, it looks like about a rank, about 5 Madgets, and it looks like the General has taken 1 wound from the Madgets. My opponent also managed to rally the Saurus Warriors who broke last turn. You can see that the Thyriscutus, as the purple one, is now up to 3 wounds. So my Giant went in, and I know the rules for the Giant have been released, or pre-released. I'm still not going to go into it, but anyways, the new Giant is much better. However, I rolled nothing but 3s or lower for my Giant, so he did nothing. He just pet the turtle, and my Iron Orcs managed to put a couple more wounds on. Over here, you can see I managed to kill off 3 of my opponent's Saurus Warriors, and in return, it didn't do anything to me. In close combat over here, yeah, I lost. Obviously, I killed 1 Temple Guard and ended up losing more than 16 Goblins. Looks like I lost about 4 ranks, so 22-ish Goblins. Luckily, I did still have more ranks, and I was steadfast, so I did stick around, but it was definitely damaging. However, I did manage to kill the Thyriscutus this turn, so the purple one in the top right of this picture, so that freed up my Giant and my Iron Orcs. So Orcs and Goblin turn 3, I declared the Wog this turn. I charged the Feral Orcs and the second chariot into the purple Saurus Warriors down on the left. I charged my Iron Orcs into the front of the Temple Guard, and my Giant and my Feral Orc Boar Boys into the other Saurus Warriors in the top right of this picture. So I've kind of encircled my opponent now, and I'm charging in all these fronts and flanks, so hopefully I can get some damage going on for my opponent. My last group of Cave Goblins doesn't really have a whole lot to do, so they're just kind of wandering back here trying to keep the Chameleon Skinks from charging or shooting at my Giant. In Magic Phase, I finally managed to get my first spell off, Flaming Swords. This was my first and only spell I managed to get off this turn. I think the magic system has also been released. Again, I'm not going to go into detail because I'm not for sure, but I am not a fan of the new magic system, but I did manage to get 1 spell off, which I felt was pretty lacking. I know I am against the Cutter Lord, but still, I felt it needed left something to be desired. In close combat, I did manage to kill about 2 ranks of Saurus Warriors. However, I did lose my Giant in return. I think I won this combat and my opponent passed the break test. I don't remember for sure. In close combat over here, yeah, I went to town. Between my second chariot charging in, which took a wound from it, either impact hit, either from dangerous terrain or from combat, I don't remember, and my feral orcs, I managed to peel off about 5, 10, 15 or more. Well, let's see. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I killed off 14 this turn. Unfortunately, my opponent was still steadfast, so it didn't break from combat, but I did do a significant number of wounds. Over here, I managed to kill looks like about 5 Temple Guard. I lost 3 Iron Orcs, and again, 20 or so Cave Goblins. The Cave Goblins broke from combat as they were no longer steadfast. My Iron Orcs were being stubborn because they have a general or they have an Iron Orc BSB with them, so they're fine. So my opponent kind of reformed, as you can see, like this, bringing the Temple Guard into more base-to-base contact, and reformed the general to charge in next turn. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient turn 4, and charge in is what my opponent did. So the general came charging into the flank of my Iron Orcs. My opponent failed a frenzy test with the 2 remaining Ramphrodon riders, and they charged into DD, or the double D rock. Yeah, so we go to combat. My opponent killed one of my feral orcs and put another wound on my general. I killed 4 of my opponent. They were still steadfast and stuck around. Close combat over here. Yeah, I whiffed and my opponent killed all 4 of my feral orcs. So my opponent has 4 Saurus Warriors left in that unit. In the top right of this picture, where a double D-Rock is, my opponent has put a total of 3 wounds on through magic and through shooting. In this close combat, though, the spider easily ate the 2 Ramphrodon riders and just reformed, so it was facing the Saurus Warriors. In close combat over here, things did not go well. My opponent's general, I don't know if he challenged or if he just killed my BSB, but either way, my BSB died, my Iron Orcs died. I don't even think my opponent ran me down. I think I just got wiped out. So either way, it was pretty depressing. Yeah, as I said, the Ramphrodon riders were easily eaten, and I refaced with DD. So that brings us to Orcs and Goblins turn 4. So I charged in my Spider and my Chariot into the front and flank of the Saurus Warriors, trying to get the points where I could. Surprisingly, I did manage to rally my fleeing Cave Goblins. So both Cave Goblin units are still rallied. My second Chariot on the far left with the Saurus Warriors, it looks like it was destroyed during the last combat. In close combat up here in the top right, I easily managed to wipe out those 4 and just kind of reformed. Over here, my opponent managed to kill my general because I could not pass a 2-4 up to save my life. So yeah, my opponent managed to put 2 more wounds on my general because I couldn't pass any saves, and so my general popped. And that was really pretty much the turning point of the game. Not only that, my opponent still had a few attacks that they threw at my feral orcs and managed to kill 2 of my feral orcs. I broke from combat, and my opponent, I think, pursued but failed to catch. So this brings us to Saurian Ancient turn 5. My opponent reformed the Temple Guard to face the Spider and Chariot. The General on the Carnosaur charged the Cave Goblins, who I think fled in terror, and attempted to redirect, but either failed or just didn't roll high enough into the other Cave Goblin group. My opponent moved up the Skink Hunters to shoot at my fleeing Boar Boys. So that brings us to Orcs and Goblins turn 5. So I charged in the Spider and the Chariot into the front of the Temple Guard. This is really not where I want to get my Spider in combat. Temple Guard are specifically designed to kill monsters, such as DD. So throwing in the Spider was really a poor decision, but it's just a friendly game, so I don't really care that much. So my other group of Cave Goblins, the larger block, I think it failed its terror test as well. It broke and it failed to rally and it fled off the board. My other group, which you can see in the bottom left of this picture with the wizard, it did manage to rally and it actually is still around. In close combat, although I think I have 1 wound left on my Spider and I took a wound on my Chariot, I didn't manage to kill quite a few of the Temple Guards, so there's only 5 Temple Guard left and my opponent's BSB Quarterlord. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient turn 6. I think my opponent charged the General into the Cave Goblins. Again, I think they failed the terror test and fled off the board. You can see the giant cat who's decided to sit on the table because that's where he wants to sit. other than that, the skinks at the bottom left shot at my boar boys and killed one, so there's one remaining, still fleeing. And so then we go to combat. I managed to kill 2 Temple Guard. My opponent either didn't do anything, or now my spider's up to 7 wounds. I can't remember which one. So that brings us to Orcs and Goblins turn 6. My one fleeing boar boy continued to flee, and then my spider and chariot did manage to kill not only the remaining Temple Guard, but also the BSB. So actually charging in with both the spider and DD actually worked out in my favor, surprisingly. I thought I was going to die for sure, but it ended up turning out pretty well. I ended up killing my opponent's BSB, which was definitely helpful. So we added up all the points and calculated it. So there was a difference of 1,251 points between the two of us, in my opponent's favor, of course. So that gave us a 713. However, my opponent moved the purple Temple Guard, the purple Saurus Warriors towards the objective that was in their deployment zone. The 2 spears crossed, and so managed to get 1 unit within 6 inches. I had no units left. I had no scoring units left, so I definitely did not get any objectives. So that was a -3 +3. So that ended up being a 416 in my opponent's favor. So it was a Saurian Ancient victory. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Still, this game took significantly longer than normal, mainly because we're still playing with the 2.0 rules, so we're not used to them. And they've changed all the names, so even if the rules haven't changed, the names have. So it takes a while to look these things up and remember what they are. But overall, it was a really fun game. My opponent really enjoyed it. They've been having some difficulties with Lizardmen of late, so I think they really enjoyed playing this list and doing well with the list. This was one of our playtesting games that me and my opponent did, so we've commented on what we thought should be improved, what we liked, what we didn't like. So that's kind of what based our decision on what figures we picked, because we were testing out units for 2.0. And so we've recorded that and added that. But I'm not going to say too much more about that. Either way, it was a great game, a great opponent. Yeah, if you guys saw any mistakes or anything you'd like to comment, please don't ask for details on the 2.0 system. I cannot tell you any more than I probably already have said. So please don't ask questions like that. But other than that, if you have other questions or anything else, please don't hesitate to put those in the comment section below. And as always, game on.